The Raiders are officially off the bye. They're preparing for the Miami Dolphins Week 11 action, and they have a welcome return of a big-time player. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for November 13th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you in a major way, whether you're checking us out wherever you find your favorite podcast, or if you're checking us out on YouTube, we appreciate you. If you are checking us out by way of YouTube, the show grows each and every day. We're over 16,000 subscribers. That's because of you, Raider Nation, and obviously because of the job my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure that, well, we look good, we sound good, we do what we're supposed to be doing by way of YouTube. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. If you want to be a part of the show, all you got to do is hit up the line. Again, 707-654-4693. And as you can imagine, we get a ton of feedback. Even if the team is 2-7 and coming off a bye, still get a ton of feedback. So we'll close out the show with that feedback from you. Segment number 2, we'll talk about the big news in the NFL that took place on Tuesday, and that was the firing of offensive coordinator Shane Waldron from the Chicago Bears, and how the Raiders can learn from that situation in Chicago and not repeat it in Las Vegas. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll talk about it in segment number 2 of the show. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, as I always do, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And it doesn't matter if it's the middle part of the season or not, you could jump into it right now with FanDuel. All new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today, and of course, I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. But on Tuesday, there was a welcome sighting, or a welcome reported, for the Silver and Black, and that's the return of one Michael Mayer. He's been out since week 3 due to personal reasons, and the Raiders tweeted out that Mike Mayer has returned to practice. That was as of Tuesday. Fantastic news. That was something that we've talked about quite a bit here on the show. Many people have chimed in and asked the question, when is Mike Mayer going to return? Is Mike Mayer going to return? And I had mentioned Vinny Bonsignore, my co-worker, my colleague there at Raider Nation Radio 920, of course, does a fantastic job covering the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal as well, had been hinting at the fact that Mike Mayer was going to be back in the building sooner rather than later, and he had noted that this week potentially could see the return. But to see Mike Mayer make that return on Tuesday and that officially be tweeted out, and that's just great news. And that's great news for multiple reasons. And as I've been trying to say this whole time, that this is not a playing time situation. This is not a Brock Bowers is getting more targets than he is or more attention than he is. He's not being utilized correctly. That had nothing to do with any of that. It truly was a personal situation. And I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that. And I know that we're in a society where we need to know everything. But as I've mentioned before, and it's not in a disrespectful way, we don't have the right to know everything. We don't have to know everything. All that we know is that Michael Mayer has been out since week 3 for personal reasons, and he's back now. So I'm just happy for the man who is Michael Mayer, and whatever he's able to bring back to the team and help the last 8 games of the season is fantastic. I'm excited about that. And again, I know that a lot of people want everyone to be an open book and share whatever's going on in their personal life just so we can know, but that's not our right. And I know there's some that feel like it is. That is an entitlement, and we're not entitled to that. Right? I mean, look, I'm a guy who's very open and honest about everything going on in my life, but that's rare. Everyone doesn't do that. Think about yourself. Think if you have something personal going on in your life. Do you feel the need to go to your job and express what's going on, or do you keep it to yourself? Most people keep stuff to themselves. Again, some of us are very open and honest and kind of an open book, and that's fine, but that's not necessarily mean that has to be for everybody. So I'm just glad that Mike Mayer, Big Mike as they like to call him, is back. We'll get to talk to Antonio Pierce today. I'm sure he's excited that Big Mike is back, and we'll also get to get inside the Raiders locker room, and maybe we'll get a chance to catch up with him and other players just on, hey, what is it like to have Big Mike back for the second half of this season. So that was great to see that Michael Mayer returned when the Raiders tweeted that out, that he had returned to practice on Tuesday. I mentioned meeting with Antonio Pierce. We actually get to talk to him at 10:20 a.m. Pacific time this morning. So depending on what time you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, it may already be over, but we did not know until Tuesday, late Tuesday evening, what time we were going to meet with Coach. So 10:20 a.m. Pacific time, and then we also have locker room action from 12:40 to 1:25. Very excited about that. Obviously want to talk to AP about, the meeting of the team on during the bye week, and if he felt like that was a real productive meeting, where they can go from that. Also want to talk to the players in the locker room about that, and as I mentioned before, the return of Big Mike. I also here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and this is my final nugget I have for this segment. We've talked a lot about Shedeur Sanders, at least I have, because I think that he would be the right quarterback for the Raiders as their franchise guy. And I know everyone doesn't agree with me, and that's okay, right? We're allowed to do that. You could feel one way or the other about Shedeur or any other quarterback that could potentially be coming up in the draft in 2025, and we'll talk about that more in segment number 2. But a lot of folks have talked about his dad, Deion Sanders. He's going to get in the way. He's going to interfere. He's going to, be a distraction. And I've been very adamant that I don't think he'll do that. As a Hall of Famer that he is, don't think that he would get in the way of his son to have an opportunity to have a really good career as well. Now, is he going to be a guy that is, protective and also want him to go to a good situation, a good organization? Absolutely, right? As, most parents, if they have that opportunity, would do the same. Well, to double down on that, he was actually Coach Prime. Deion Sanders was on Speak, the show Speak on FS1. It's hosted by Joy Taylor. Keyshawn Johnson was on, Michael Irvin, Paul Pierce, all part of the show. And Coach Prime was asked by Keyshawn Johnson about certain locations and when he'd be protective, and also brought up Travis Hunter as well. So I thought this was pretty interesting. I'm not an FS1 guy. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I just don't tune in. I think that all those folks from Joy Taylor, Keyshawn Johnson, Irvin, and Paul Pierce, they're all fine at what they do. I just am not a guy that pays attention to FS1 very often. But my guy DJ actually hit me up by way of Twitter, and he's on Twitter at just_another_DJ, and brought this sound to my attention. So I definitely appreciate him, and I think it's interesting to hear as well. So here's Coach Prime on Speak on FS1 on Tuesday talking about Shedeur.
Prime, he's probably going to be 1 or 2 top quarterback off the board if they know anything, right? And that organization may be 1, 2, 3, 4. Will you step in Eli Manning like, Deion Sanders like, to the point where, like, you told him, hey, man, I ain't taking that psych test with the Giants. I followed you after that. I said I wasn't taking it either. Will you step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
Yeah. Okay.
So you said you're going to be dad. You're going to be dad. You're going to be dad.
I'm dad. The cows come home. Yes, sir. And with Travis as well.
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting that's your other son.
That's your other son.
But give us a little bit more insight on where you would like to. You don't even have to name teams. You can just give me region, style, whatever, that Shedeur needs or you want to see him go and play for. You don't have to give me teams. Just give me regions.
I'm not going to give you regions. I give you understanding.
Give me understanding.
Somebody that can handle the quarterback that he is. Somebody that can handle understanding that what he's capable of. Someone that has had success in the past handling quarterbacks, or someone in an organization understands what they're doing. Not just throwing you out there amongst the wolves. You don't have the support in the infrastructure of the team. Forget the line. He's played with lines that hadn't been great, but he's been able to do his thing. But just the infrastructure of the team and the direction of where we're going. He could deal with anything. One thing about Shedeur that separates him from a lot of quarterbacks, Shedeur started every game in high school, every game in college but one, and he's like that, man. Like, he has a true gift, and it comes from God, and he loves this game of football. You see him stunning like his daddy every now and then, but that's just who he is. He got that honest. You got to see that. He got that honest. But this kid loves this game, and he has an insatiable appetite to win. And I want somebody to be able to propel him to the next level as well. Not just getting drafted by a team, because We ain't having it.
I like how, of course, he's not going to bring up any teams. He also mentioned that, if there's an objection that he has, he's not going to do it publicly. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, he ain't going there. He'll do it privately behind the scenes, which is the correct way to do things, right? If there is any kind of situation that he sees coming up, they definitely need to do it that way. But also what he was talking about, regions and not necessarily giving a region, but, giving reasons and things that have to be in place. And listening to that, and I remember going back and forth with DJ on Twitter, listening to what Coach Prime had to say, to me, and it's just me, and yes, I know that I'm a guy that wants Shedeur to be the quarterback of the Raiders. I know this, but to me, it sounds like a good situation that Tom Brady would be able to have his thumbprint on, right? I mean, everything that Deion Sanders described right there sound like Tom Brady being able to set up the quarterback in a really good position to succeed, whether that means starting him right away or not starting him right away, because I do believe, as Tom Brady has said multiple times, QB shouldn't come into the league and start right away. So that probably would mean that the Raiders don't start Shedeur right away if they were to end up getting him, but that Tom Brady is going to have a say and a little bit of a hand in helping put him in position to be able to succeed in the National Football League. Again, that's what I heard from it. Maybe you heard something different. If you did, please let me know. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Coming up in segment number 2, want to talk about the big news of the day in the NFL on Tuesday and how the Raiders could learn from it so they don't make that same mistake. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including FanDuel, which is the title sponsor of the show. And you got to get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So maybe the Raiders will be cooking on Sunday versus Miami, and you say, you know what, let me go to FanDuel. Let me open this bad boy up, America's #1 sportsbook, place a little wager on it because I feel good about what the Raiders are doing right now and what they're going to potentially do in the second half. You can make that happen. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I also want to tell you about Prize Picks. What is Prize Picks? Well, glad you asked. It is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions with a B of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And right now with Prize Picks, they invented the flex play. What is that? Well, it means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. And right now, Prize Picks obviously puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get money in as quick as 15 minutes, and they offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. So think about this. If you're on Prize Picks and you're looking at a football board, you could be selecting Jamar Chase for more than 79.5 receiving yards and or Patrick Mahomes for more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Maybe you're looking at Travis Kelce for more than 59.5 receiving yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 79.5 rushing yards. It's just that simple. All you got to do to get in on the action is download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. The promo code is LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about the big news in the NFL on Tuesday and how it can relate to the Raiders and how they can not make the same mistake that the Chicago Bears did, where ultimately they fire their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, after a handful of games because, well, the Bears' offense is not very good under Caleb Williams and all those weapons that they have in Chicago. And look, they haven't scored a touchdown in 23 straight drives. And some will probably say that the Raiders have already made that mistake, but I'll say that they haven't gone there and made that mistake as of just yet. And one thing that I like to do, whether it's on my radio show or the podcast or even in conversation, is take examples of something that may not be Raider related and make it and find out how we could talk about it when it pertains to the Raiders. And I think that this situation, when you talk about the OC, you talk about a young hotshot quarterback, that is a great opportunity to talk about this situation, especially as the Raiders are sitting there at 2-7. We've talked about the draft order. We've talked about quarterbacks. I've told you the quarterbacks that I'm looking at, the quarterback that I prefer to be the franchise guy for the Raiders. But the fact that the Raiders have to do right by that quarterback when they select him, something that the Bears did not do right by Caleb Williams. Look, I mean, there's been 2 offensive coordinators fired so far this year in the National Football League. Luke Getsy of the Raiders and Shane Waldron now of the Bears. Thing is, both offensive coordinators came from the Bears. Luke Getsy was fired there, and Shane Waldron replaced him. Luke Getsy comes to the Raiders and gets fired, right? So it's like the guys in Chicago are the only ones. So if there's any ties to Chicago anywhere else around the league, look out. Your job may be next. So that's the, and again, I don't ever root for anyone to lose their job, but that's the reality of it. I say it all the time. The NFL is not for long. It's also a production-based business. If you don't produce, you won't be in business. So we know Antonio Pierce fired Luke Getsy. Scott Turner is now the interim OC. Maybe he'll be the long-term OC. Who knows? I don't know. But he fired him, and that's always, okay, look, the production's not there. You got to figure out how to get things right. And so one of the biggest things is when the Bears knew, and the only difference that the Bears have that the Raiders have, right now the Raiders, they don't know where they'll be selecting. They know that they're in the draft, and they're picking number 5 right now overall. That's right now going into week 11. The Bears knew that they had the number 1 overall pick. So the most important hire that they should have had, Matt Eberflus should have hired, was the OC that best fit what Caleb Williams does. And they didn't do that. They ended up going with Shane Waldron. So I was on Greeny on ESPN Radio on Tuesday. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I actually fill in for Greeny, and I'm on with Jay Williams from Duke, national champion, number 2 overall draft pick by the Chicago Bulls. I'm on doing the show with him, which is fantastic. But we went back and forth because the news broke basically right as the show started. So we went back and forth on this situation, and Jay brought up a great point about the bad hire job that Matt Eberflus did with the offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. Check out what Jay Will had to say.
We're talking about Shane Waldron today, being let go from the organization. But this pick is on Matt Eberflus, right? Right. That was the pick that you needed. That's your stamp. That's your signature thing that you've done. For the number 1 overall pick, having the right OC that can connect with him is what will determine the success of your organization. So when I hear guys like Greeny, when I hear other guys that have been watching this game for over 30 years say it's an organizational failure, right, they are accurate. Because, look, as a top pick, there's nothing more that you want than somebody new, somebody fresh, not somebody that has just came off having another quarterback in Justin Fields, where now they're trying to readapt or readjust the whole offensive scheme. You want somebody with a fresh pair of eyes, right? My game is different. Mm-hmm. So it leads to the question, Matt Eberflus is not the guy for the job. That is apparent, right? I do think there are questions around Ryan Poles that we can get into later. But McCaskey and company, the owners of this team, I think you have to give Caleb Williams a new, dynamic, offensive-minded person that can help elevate this scheme offensively for the Bears.
So there was Jay Will on Greeny's show on ESPN Radio on Tuesday, and you hear what he's saying is that we're talking about Shane Waldron, but that was a fail by Matt Eberflus to not go in the right direction and do what they were supposed to do and hire the right guy that can get the most out of Caleb Williams as far as production goes. So how does that relate to the Raiders? I'm sure you're asking. Well, I'm glad you asked, because Antonio Pierce is going to have the opportunity, I do believe, unless Scott Turner ends up being the guy, right? He's going to have the opportunity, if they do go get a franchise quarterback in the draft, which I do believe that they're going to do, then he's going to have to be tasked with the job of making sure he doesn't hire just a offensive coordinator, put anyone in place, like he hired Luke Getsy to be Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew's OC. He needs to make sure he hires someone that's dynamic, someone that's got creativity, someone that is experienced play caller, but also can get the most out of these young quarterbacks coming into the league, have some college concepts, because that's where it's going. Like, that's going to be his job. And there was a time, and we all know Luke Getsy wasn't the first option when it came to the offensive coordinator. It was supposed to be Cliff Kingsbury, right? There was multiple interviews that had happened. I remember it was a Friday. We had talked on my radio show about Cliff Kingsbury, what he was going to do as the OC there with the Raiders. And then all of a sudden, Saturday, I'm in the barbershop, and I get the alert that Cliff Kingsbury has pulled his name out of the search, and he's not going to be the Raiders offensive coordinator after all. And I was like, wait, hold on. What? And then all of a sudden they pivot and go to Luke Getsy. And of course, there's plenty of different reasons why. I mean, a lot of people talked about the length of the contract. He wanted another year. The Raiders weren't willing to give it to him. Some say because they didn't have the quarterback and they weren't going to be able to get the quarterback. But the Raiders wanted Cliff Kingsbury. They didn't get him. And instead they settled for Luke Getsy. And clearly that proved to be wrong as they ended up firing him. The Bears, they met with Cliff Kingsbury as well. Remember, Cliff last worked with Caleb Williams at USC. They met with him for a very long time and didn't hire him either. So they failed in that same regard. The guy that knew him and knew how to get the most out of him, they decided not to hire him. And you see what he's doing in D.C. with Jaden Daniels, and they're thriving. Even though they lost over the weekend to Pittsburgh, they're playing some really good ball. Peter Schrager from Good Morning Football on NFL Network talks about both coordinators, both Getsy and Waldron, being fired by the Raiders and the Bears, and what the options were and how they both talked to Cliff Kingsbury for a long, lengthy amount of time, and neither team hired him, and how that was a fail. Check it out.
You give these 3-year deals out for these coordinators, and you go through this whole thing, and you let the head coach do the process and what's comfortable. The Las Vegas Raiders had Cliff Kingsbury interviewed twice in Las Vegas, and he sat with them twice. The Chicago Bears traveled out to L.A. to meet with Cliff Kingsbury, who was with Caleb Williams at USC and had a great relationship with Caleb. They did an 8-hour interview with Cliff Kingsbury in a suit in Marina Del Rey and thought, nah, you know what? Shane Waldron's the better hire for us. And then the Washington Commanders were the ones who hired Cliff Kingsbury, who were doing flips about talking about how he's going to be the next head coach of an NFL team. It matters who these guys hires. It matters when it's young quarterbacks. As we see Luke Getsy already fired in Vegas, and we see now over here Shane Waldron already fired in Chicago. The coordinators matter with these young quarterbacks as much as the head coaches. Shane Waldron lasted just 10 weeks with the Chicago Bears, and they hired him to a 3-year guaranteed contract with hopes that he was going to be Caleb's muse. It matters, guys. It matters who you hire, and that's almost as important as a decision with a young quarterback as it is head coach.
Peter Schrager right there from Good Morning Football. Just passing that along and saying how both the Bears and the Raiders had opportunities to hire Cliff Kingsbury. And look, the Raiders, in my opinion, don't have a dynamic quarterback, but it would have been smart to get a dynamic offensive coordinator and see what they could do with what they had. They didn't do that. Again, I feel like that was a fail. And Antonio Pierce, unless Scott Turner ends up being the guy that they go with full time instead of just the interim offensive coordinator, is going to have to make sure that that's his best hire. I've heard a lot of people say, go get Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's not going to go to any team unless he's the head coach, right? He's going to stay right there in Detroit as the offensive coordinator unless he goes somewhere to be the head coach. Bobby Slowick was a guy that, was highly sought after, and he stayed in H-Town, and right now he's struggling, right? He does well in the first half, but second half of games, they're struggling. I don't think the Texans have scored a touchdown in about 4 games in the second half, so that's obviously a problem. Todd Monken there in Baltimore with the Ravens. He's a guy that probably is going to be head coach material, or not. He'll stay there with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Why wouldn't you? Right? That's a good dynamic right there. So, again, you have to go, and when I say you, I'm talking about Antonio Pierce. You have to go out there, and if you do have a chance to go get that franchise quarterback, whether it's Shedeur, Cam Ward, whether it's Carson Beck, whether it's Quinn Ewers, whether it's Dylan Gabriel, right? Anybody that you're thinking about, anything, Jalen Milroe. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks out there. Jackson Dart, right? There's so many quarterbacks out there that are going to be in the draft, and I know that it's not the sexiest draft like it was last year as far as quarterbacks go. Doesn't mean that one of these guys or a couple of these guys aren't going to be really good quarterbacks. It just means that they're not highly touted and ranked as much as the last draft. You only need one. You just need one quarterback to be really stinking good and be your franchise guy and be able to kind of turn your franchises, I don't want to say luck, but their fortunes around, because that's what it is. You got to have that guy. Personally, and I could be wrong, and if I am, I'll come back and say it, I don't think Aiden O'Connell is the long-term solution, and I know that Gardner Minshew isn't the long-term solution. Now, again, Aiden O'Connell is going to come back from IR sooner rather than later. Maybe he gets in on the action before the season's over and we get a chance to see what he looks like, and maybe he wows everyone, and all of a sudden he is the guy. Me personally, I think that they got to go into the draft and get their guy. I don't want to look at Band-Aids and go and hire a free agent. Don't think that they need a free agent. They go sign a guy like that. I think they need to make sure that they get their dude, build around him, have that, younger presence, quarterback, offensive line, running back is obviously a need. Have some dudes on defense, just have that so they can build it up. And so they're not just good one year, but they can sustain that consistent good quality play and get back on track where they need to go. But AP's number one job, once everything is over this season and whatever they decide that they're going to do, if they are going to potentially get into the draft and get their franchise quarterback, they have to, number one priority, make sure that they hire a dynamic play caller, somebody that's familiar with the college game, somebody that knows how to get the most out of one of these young quarterbacks that they could potentially get. If they don't, it could be as bad as what the Bears have done with Caleb Williams in Chicago. There's no part of me that thinks he's not a good quarterback, but there's a lot of me that thinks that they've put him in a terrible position and have not put him up in a position to succeed, whereas you see what Cliff Kingsbury has been able to do with Jaden Daniels in Washington, and they're having nothing but success. So that's what I got for you. Would love to hear your thoughts on that as well at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts will close out the show. That's coming up next. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including Ultimate Pro Football GM. Raider Nation, remember that great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Good. Well, they're back, and they've added an amazing new game mode that I got to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory, it now has a head coach career mode. So, on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring coaching staff, you can also get to call offensive plays during games as well. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps, upgraded negotiation system. The fun and realistic game just got a lot better. If you've already had it installed, all good. Be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, that's also all good. You can download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. You'll love it. I know you will. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for all Locked On Raider podcast listeners and only Locked On Raider podcast listeners. Okay, that's not true. It's for everyone that listens to the Locked On Podcast Network, but don't tell them that. Use the promo code Locked On NFL. It's all one word, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. Download the game. It's easy. Visit ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Cheese Grater Raider. He's calling to talk about Shedeur Sanders and why would he want to play at the Raiders in general. It's a good question from Cheese Grater Raider.
What's up, Q? What's up, Raider Nation? This is Cheese Grater Raider. And I know we started talking about the quarterback situation on today's show, Tuesday. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. And people are talking about how Shedeur Sanders, how he can hold out in basically Eli Manning his way, and I think you mentioned it as well, into just being a Raider. And that kind of argues or brings up the question, like, why would he want to do that just to be a Raider? Like, what have the Raiders been for the last 2 decades for someone to say, you know what, no, I want to hold out and I want to be a Raider? I don't see Deion pushing that. I don't really see Shedeur pushing that. I'm pretty sure there's other teams to be a part of other than the Raiders that would be a better option for him, for his game and his future. I mean, right now, I compare the Raiders quarterback situation to Cleveland's quarterback situation, where it just seems like any quarterback that plays for them just doesn't have it. You look at Baker, he left, and he had some success pretty much anywhere else that he's been. With the Rams, he had a little bit of success. He beat us, but he had a little bit of success there, and then he went on to play with Tampa Bay, and you see what he's doing now. Obviously, we had Derek Carr, but that didn't really do anything for us. That just kind of delayed the inevitable. And another thing, you had a caller talk about why not wait, because Shedeur is not worth a first-round pick. Why not wait until next year, 26, and grab a Arch Manning? Well, I hate to say it, but Arch Manning's a redshirt freshman, and he's not going to be draft eligible for another 2 years. So as great as that sounds, And in fact, that's another quarterback who I just don't see. You know, he's a Manning. He didn't want to play for that West Coast team over there in San Diego. I could see it being the same way. He don't want to play. I could see Manning not wanting to play, or his family not wanting him to play for that West Coast team and the Raiders. Anyways, that's all I got, Q. Love what you do, man. Like to hear your thoughts. Go Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. Appreciate you. And you bring up a good point, right? I mean, the Raiders have not shown any kind of consistency. They haven't looked like that kind of a dynamic team that all of a sudden is going to go and win a championship. They're picking at the top of the draft, if they pick at the top of the draft, for a reason. Like, I get all that. But from what I heard from Coach Sanders and from, you know, times that he's talked where he doesn't want Shedeur to go play in a cold weather climate, so that eliminates a few organizations. He doesn't want him to go play for a couple other organizations that aren't very steady, so that can eliminate some, and some could say that would eliminate the Raiders. But ultimately, I think that the relationship with Tom Brady is a big deal. I really do. Just like we heard in segment number 1 when he was on FS1 on Speak with Joy Taylor, I think that it's a big deal. And that goes for Travis Hunter as well. And I'm not saying they're both going to go to the Raiders. That'd be a pipe dream, right? But I don't think that you can eliminate the Raiders from that conversation. Plus, Deion has a relationship with Mark Davis. Deion back in the day was supposed to be a Raider, but the Chargers jumped in and claimed him off waivers the year that the Raiders were making that deep run, and they could have definitely used him. He was going to play for the Silver and Black. He's got a relationship with AP. They both, Deion and Shedeur, have a relationship with Tom Brady. There's a lot there. I'd seen Shedeur. He's, had multiple conversations with Sandra Douglas Morgan, who's the president. He's had conversations with Mark Davis. So I do think there's some genuine interest. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think there's some genuine interest there. As far as Arch Manning goes, you're right. He's a redshirt freshman, but he's available in the 2026 draft. So he's not available coming up in 2025 in April. He'd have to play one more year. 2023 was his redshirt freshman year, his redshirt year, I should say. Obviously, 2024 is his freshman year, and then 2025 he has to play. You only have to be 3 years removed from high school to be able to go into the NFL draft. And I'm not saying he's going to, but he'd be eligible following the 2025 season. So the 2026 draft, he'd be available. So, if you wanted to wait out for Arch Manning, I guess you could, but then that means that you would have to stink not only 1 year, but another year, and you'd hope that you're close to the number 1 overall pick, and that's a big-time gamble that I don't think I'm willing to wait for. I think he's going to be a good quarterback, but I don't think it's worth that type of wait. But that's just me. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Got a pretty lengthy text here from Raider Sanchez. Hey, Q, Raider Sanchez from Nebraska. I haven't texted in this year yet, so I figured now would be a good time. Today's text about AP. Last year, I was one of AP's advocates for him becoming a head coach. He has preached a hard mentality and old Raider tradition. But so far this year, this team has been soft and disorganized. I've come to a point where I'm not sure I trust him next year with the rookie quarterback. Firing Getsy was the right move. The offense was literally non-existent. And I also get it. We originally had Kingsbury and had to go to Getsy as a last resort. But this is also partially due to AP not being an experienced coach that can't run either side of the field. Even if he did manage to hire a great OC, what's going to happen when they get hired away as a head coach? We have to count on a lot of things going right for that to work. A great OC is going to want to go to the best situation. AP hasn't shown to be able to provide that. If we keep him on next year, we have to completely rely on them being able to build a competent coaching staff, and he isn't exactly attracting top talent. In my opinion, we should give AP the rest of the year. If there's no significant improvement or obvious strides in the right direction, I say we let him go to bring in an offensive head coach like Ben Johnson. Offensive coaches like that are not always available, and we're not always in position to draft a high potential quarterback. I understand the argument of coaching turnover, but there's also no point in trying to force something for years when you pretty much already know where things are headed. It's how we ended up in the car purgatory there for a while. Well, anyway, sorry for the long text, Q. I have a lot more to rant about, but going to leave it at this as Raider Sanchez. And look, that kind of goes with what we were talking about in segment number 2, right? Except for I was talking about AP going out and hiring a big-time offensive coordinator. But you're also right, because he is responsible for putting Getsy in that position. That's on his hire, just like, the hire that Matt Eberflus agreed to with Shane Waldron, right? That's on him. That was his pick. Right. And so if that doesn't work out, that's on Eberflus. So Getsy not working out, that's on AP. So, yeah, they do need to have a really good staff around him. He's a good motivator. He's a good leader of men, I do believe. But they do need to have a strong, sharp, offensive-minded coach and more around him. And that could get into the weeds of things, and who knows, maybe that's where Tom Brady comes in. Maybe that's where he smooths things over and helps. I don't know. Again, I hate that I keep bringing up Brady's name and don't know exactly what his specific role is going to be and how he's going to, use it to his advantage to help this team in the long haul. But, it does make sense. And there could be a time when they all sit down together and say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying to get rid of AP, but that could be a decision that ownership, the front office, they all have to sit down and make with each other. Is it worth moving forward? That's a decision for people that make a lot more money than me, guys that are a lot smarter than me and can run the organization where I can sit back and talk about it. So you bring up a good point. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Richard in the 831. He's calling to piggyback off Jordan and Oregon's call about the Raiders having a reset and a full reset at that. Here he is, Richard in the 831.
Hey, it's Rich from the 831, yeah. Hey, so just wanted to kind of piggyback off a caller on this is Jordan from Oregon. Off that reset, I think I know what he's getting at, and when I think of reset, I mean, name me the last time the Raiders had a fully true reset. And I'm talking like a full reset. I'm not talking bringing in like an older player like Richard Seymour, which I love Richard, but it's just you're signing a player like that or bringing him in because you're thinking you're going to get that's what's going to help your team. Or trading for a Randy Moss when you know the team wasn't going to be very good. Even trading for Devontae. Just stuff like that. When I'm thinking of a reset, and I'm thinking this is what Jordan was meaning, was I'm thinking like the Detroit Lions, right, with Dan Campbell. Like, hey, we're not going to be very good the first year. Plan to get a little bit better the second year. The third year we plan on competing for, playoff run. And if you want to go more current, look at the Arizona Cardinals. That was kind of the same thing as well with them, right? Their first year they weren't very good. This year they're probably ahead of schedule. But they came in with a reset as well too, right? Yeah, you can say, well, both of them had quarterbacks. They traded for Goff, the Lions, Cardinals have Murray. And I understand that, but they've resetted their team. They've drafted well. They brought in their players that they need. And they've had some flack on their drafts, more so the Lions. But I think that's what he meant by the reset. And I mean, I'm on board with that. I mean, it's something that's probably necessary because I can't think of the last time the Raiders fully, truly did that. Because they're always trying to, let's bring these guys in. Hopefully we can win now. It's just something that I think makes sense. I'm on board with it if we want to go that way. I just think that's what he was trying to imply. As far as college quarterbacks, I'm with you with Shedeur. And I think from there, I like Jackson Dart. I also like Gabriel. Crazy thing about all those is they've all played a lot. And that's very important to me, is getting a quarterback that's played a lot. I want someone that's played. There are, I don't think it's as deep as last year's class, but I think it's a good class. Anyways, man, I just wanted to touch base on that. Hope you're having a good week, and I'm happy the Raiders are back on Sunday, regardless of what's going on in the season. And, I want to still watch them, I want to still root for them, and I'll still believe for him, man. Other than that, have a good week. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Go Raiders.
Big Rich, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And look, as far as the last time the Raiders had a hard reset, I'd say that was when Gruden returned and traded Mack, traded Cooper, got so much draft capital, right? Remember all the 3 first-round draft picks that they had, and then they had 2 draft picks in the first round the next year, right? And then all those extra multiple picks that they got for Khalil Mack. I would say that was their hard reset. And I actually had this conversation in the barbershop on Saturday when folks were talking about trade Max Crosby. I said, why would you do that? Oh, to get more draft capital. I said, yeah, because that worked out well the last time they did it. They did all that. They traded Khalil Mack, who was a generational talent at the time, and they got Josh Jacobs for it. And I'm a big fan of Josh Jacobs. Don't get me wrong. I was so happy when they drafted him number 24 overall. But that's all that really came from them getting them trading Khalil Mack was the good years that the Raiders had with Josh Jacobs, and now he's not even a Raider anymore. So out of their full reset, it really didn't do a whole lot of anything. So I understand what you're saying, but a full reset doesn't always mean it's going to work because it didn't work when Gruden returned the second time. Was the team getting better when he had to step down from his position? Sure. They were getting better, but were they where they needed to be? Not really, right? I mean, there was a lot to still be desired about that team. And that's exactly why, I'm good with you and everyone talking about a young quarterback. I like the offensive line pieces in JPJ, DJ Glaze. I think that's something to build off of. Obviously, there's other pieces to work around. I think some younger position players like running back You see you got the younger wide receivers, probably get another wide receiver weapon in the draft, right? Just get some guys that can have some sustainability with the team. Maybe they re-sign one of their free agents, especially on defense. Maybe they re-sign one or two of those guys to have that. And then, of course, you've got, the anchors and Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins and even Robert Spillane, even though he's on the final year of his deal as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's some stuff to like there for the Raiders for sure. I don't think a full reset is needed, but obviously there's some key players and key positions that need to be addressed. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. And we'll close out with a text from Gonzo Raider in the 505. Hey, Q, Gonzo Raider here from the 505. A few things. We need a W. So let's go Raiders and get that win in South Beach. Next, any update on Michael Mayer? Finally, I think the generational talent label for the quarterback of the future seems a bit fairy tale-ish. We need a solid veteran in the room and draft a quarterback. Wentz is sitting as a backup in KC, should be well-rested, uninjured, and wanting to get back to a starting level. Might be an idea. Let's all not forget we need O-line. It doesn't matter who's under center if they don't have protection. Final thought, what about bringing back Renfro? As a Renfro fan, I know that would hype the nation. How many of us still have third and Renfro jerseys? Always Raiders all day and every day. Let's make the Raiders great again. Raiders, that's Gonzo Raider in the 505. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you, and I'm out on Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz hasn't been good since Philadelphia, right? He's had multiple opportunities. He just doesn't seem like very much of a leader. He went to Indy, Washington. He was in, L.A. with the Chargers? No, with the Rams, I should say, in L.A., and now in KC. Yeah, I'm out on Wentz. If you're going to sign a veteran quarterback, I mean, you have one in Gardner Minshew, and I don't think that he's great, but you have one there. And if you don't want him to be, then you have Aiden O'Connell, right? So if you do draft a young stud, you can let Aiden O'Connell start. And then at some point, you can pass the sticks on to whoever that young quarterback is. Like, I don't see why you'd go out and spend money on a Carson Wentz or a Sam Darnold or fill in the blank of, whatever veteran quarterback is out there when the ultimate goal is to get to your franchise quarterback, the young dude anyway. Remember, Minshew was a 2-year deal. So 2 years guaranteed, 2 years, $15 million. So there's that. Why move on from him? I know he's not great, but again, he's not the end all be all. He's just a placeholder. So I don't see that. As far as Renfro goes, I've said this 1,000 times. What I've been told from people that make decisions is Renfro only wants to play for a couple teams, and the Raiders ain't the one. Right? And it's not because of the Raiders as an organization. It's because of the vicinity. Like, he wants to be back closer to his home where he lives. I mean, he used to, drive from Vegas to his hometown, which is somewhere near Clemson. He used to do that like every off season. He'd get in his truck and drive there to be with his family and be with his dad and everything. And so that's where he's at right now. So there's a couple of teams. I think, NFC South teams like the Saints would be a team that makes sense for him. Maybe the Carolina Panthers. Teams like that would make sense for Renfro, but I just don't think he wants to be all the way out west with the Raiders. And I don't know how the relationship ended with the Raiders, except for him not being, played very often. I don't know if he has any desire to go back and play with the Raiders, or the Raiders want him either. So I think that ship has sailed on one Hunter Renfro. I know there's a lot of fans of his. He was great while he was great, but that only lasted for a very short amount of time. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And as always, kind of go over the time that we're allotted here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, but I appreciate you rocking with us. And thanks to so many people that reached out to me and sent me a text or a tweet or whatever the case may be about the one saying that I couldn't come up with on Tuesday's show. You play the hand, right? Wait, you play the cards that your hand is dealt. Wait, yeah, I don't know why when it's like on the spot, why I keep messing it up. You play the cards that you're dealt, or you play the hand that you're dealt. Whatever. Obviously, that's a saying I don't need to say, but so many people reached out to me and told me what it was, so I'm just going to quit there. But we'll be back tomorrow, Raider Nation. Got plenty to talk about as the Raiders are preparing for an opponent, the Miami Dolphins in South Beach, coming up on Sunday. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. More importantly, as always, just win, baby.